And I do have the first 5 prepared I want to tell you about, but there's 2 little bits of news I want to drop because I learned both of them on the way here. One is that Vice President Pence has announced that the White House is actually in conversations about shutting down the coronavirus special group panel, whatever it's called, the coronavirus group that he's heading up. This is a signal that the White House, in my opinion, is going to begin backstepping away from being in charge of our country's reaction to the coronavirus and letting the authority go back to the states where it should be anyway to deal with the fallout of the crisis. So Vice President Pence announced they're beginning talking about abandoning or disbanding the coronavirus committee. Second one, just a little bit of amazingly interesting news, but do you remember we've been talking about how the whole reaction to the coronavirus threat, which is a serious threat, but the whole reaction in America, the massive shutdown of America, was based on a series of models. One of the most significant models came from England, came from Dr. Neil Ferguson in England, who had early on this coronavirus crisis put together models projecting within America, for example, between 1.5 and 2.2 million deaths, just millions and millions of cases of infection. And his models were used by America and people around the world to instigate or encourage this massive reaction we did as a country, this massive shutdown. And as you all know, because we talked about in the show, that those models were just grotesquely, outrageously exaggerated. They were false. They were very, very wrong. Well, the news just came out just a little while ago that Dr. Ferguson has been forced to step down. He no longer is going to be with, and we get the correct name of his, the institution in England that he was with the Imperial College of London. He had to step down today, and of all the just ironic reasons, he had to step down for violating the quarantine that went in place because of his models, and he violated the quarantine to sneak out and meet with his married lover. So Dr. Neil Ferguson out, and frankly kind of out in a most coincidentally isn't even a good enough word, kind of a little bit of community justice or something, breaking the quarantine, loses his job. But what I really want to do today's first 5 very quickly before we have Dr. Everett Piper join us is talk about a poll that was done. And I'm wanting to talk about it not because necessarily the results of the poll that I feel sure are accurate, but more about what it says about how America is handling our coronavirus policy going forward. So the Washington Post and University of Maryland did a poll in which they discovered this is a whopping number, 82% of Americans oppose. This is about how do you want America to reopen? How quickly? Are we doing it too quickly? 82% of Americans say they're opposed to opening movie theaters. 78% are opposed to opening gyms. 74% say restaurants should not be open. So it's polling saying what Americans think about whether or not the governors in the various states should reopen their economies. And the reason I want to talk about it is this. We've been dealing with this coronavirus obviously as a huge health challenge, a strain on the medical system, challenges getting needed supplies to hospitals and doctors. But it has become a political issue. It has become an issue related to freedom, to the God-given freedom we've all agreed we have simply because we were born, that is recounted in our Declaration of Independence, God-given rights that we each have. This coronavirus policy has become in our country a direct affront to the guarantee of liberty. And so therefore, when they do polls like this, the Washington Post has a poll like this, what they're doing is signaling or validating to elected officials, don't worry, continue the shutdown. America's right with you. They did not do this poll out of idle curiosity. It is intended to be used for encouraging elected officials around this country to continue the lockdowns they are engaged in, to continue the crushing of the personal liberty guaranteed to us in the Constitution. It is like they polled America saying, what percentage of you think that people should be allowed to go to a particular church? What percentage of Americans do you think should be allowed to pursue this kind of medical care versus that kind of medical care? What percentage of Americans do you think people should be allowed to express this kind of freedom? It's a poll asking people whether the government should continue to shut down constitutional freedom. It doesn't matter if 100% of the people answered and said, never reopen America again. Other people's opinions are irrelevant to the idea that we have a constitutional right to freedom, and that we insist as Americans that we have that right. That includes to run our businesses, to move about freely, to live in freedom in this country. The idea the poll was even conducted is, I think, a message from the leftists. They're looking for validation. They're looking to get messages to elected officials, hey, don't worry, America's right with you. It doesn't matter how many people think America should continue our shutdown for another week, a month, a year, whatever it is. It's an irrelevant poll. And if you substitute in other freedoms we agree we have, it's particularly irrelevant. And one last thing, we're going to talk more about this in today's show and in upcoming shows, but what has happened in this coronavirus scare is that the original numbers came out that were very alarming. And part and parcel of the entire package, the way we chose to respond as a country, the advice given to President Trump by the doctors who are advising him, was a whole package deal based on fear, based on completely inaccurate data, and then based on implanting fear in people's minds that this is the Andromeda strain. This is going to kill us all. And so you have Americans, the reason they're giving those answers to polls is because they're really, really afraid. But this is why it's so important for Americans to begin to understand more of the data available now, showing that this virus wasn't nearly as lethal as everybody thought, number one. Number two, that the entire course we chose in reaction to it was really a course that put us in the path of not having enough Americans get out, get exposed to the virus as humans do, viruses of all kinds, work through it, be done. But the other thing, and this is my last point in this first 5, is this. The policy we created in Washington that we've been following, and that state governments and local officials, everything they do flows from what Washington said. It had a false notion underlying all of it, which was that somehow, if you just follow the instructions of the government, of your governor, of your mayor, of your county judge, you can be safe. That somehow safety is guaranteeing your complete and personal safety is a job of the government, which it is not. It's also the message that there's a way to get to safety. And so the fact that you hear more doctors saying, actually, the virus is everywhere, you can't really guarantee safety. I'll tell you a quick little story in Dallas to make this point. In the city of Dallas, or outside the city of Dallas, there is a Catholic school, and it's attached to a monastery. So there are Catholic monks here in this Dallas area who do occasionally get out to teach classes, but they literally live in the monastery. They have no connection with the outside world. 9 monks at this Irving monastery tested positive for COVID-19. You can't even avoid it if you stay home like monks stay home. I am just closing this first 5 by saying we had a very false notion sold to America that somehow following every single protocol that the government thought of would keep us safe. And there simply is no way to do that here on this planet Earth. And that, my friends, is today's first 5.